This one's wife, Harry in Angola. At what cost? Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Prince Harry, Ginge. The Prince of Pink Pancakes. The ginge to her cringe. The jerk to her twerk. The druggie to her huggy. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, goes by many titles, but he also likes to add to those the concept of him being a dragon slayer that has been taking on the British press and slaying those fearsome dragons that have made his life such a misery. That he stands up against disinformation on the internet, that he protects the children in the online environment, that he is an advocate for functioning democracies, that he wanted people to be vaccinated during the COVID pandemic, that he is alarmed by climate change and, naturally, wants to ensure that people don't tread on landmines in Angola. Hence, his current visit. So much so that Harry is so concerned about all of these matters, let's just have a reminder of the level of his concern from a speech that he gave to the United Nations General Assembly on Nelson Mandela International Day back in July 2022. Here he is.
How many of us feel battered, helpless, in the face of the seemingly endless stream of disasters and devastation? I understand. This has been a painful year in a painful decade. We're living through a pandemic that continues to ravage communities in every corner of the globe. Climate change wreaking havoc on our planet, with the most vulnerable suffering most of all. The few weaponizing lies and disinformation at the expense of the many. And from the horrific war in Ukraine to the rolling back of constitutional rights here in the United States, we are witnessing a global assault on democracy and freedom.
And I half expected him to round that off by going, and it's great to be causing it all, isn't it? You hopeless motherfuckers. But no, Harry has aligned himself on the side of good, that he is concerned about these matters, in particular, climate change. After all, he has headed off, or jetted off rather, to another trip to Angola, crossing the Atlantic. We don't have precise details as to his method of travel, whether he flew commercially or privately. We certainly know he didn't swim there, and he didn't take a slow boat. And therefore, it's another instance of Harry engaging in what looks like virtual signalling. But what's the cost? What has been the cost of Harry and this one's wife on the environment? Both profess to care about the environment. Harry has his organisation Travelist, which is meant to assist in the calculation of the carbon footprint in respect of people's travel so they can make informed choices. But does he apply this to the travel of him and this one's wife? Well, I obtained a breakdown, and it's an estimate because we don't have exact records, but we considered the flight types and the distances based upon available information from a variety of different reports to estimate the carbon footprint of Prince Harry and this one's wife from 2018 until now. I've taken from when they were married. Back in 2019, there were 2 reported private jet flights. They went to Nice and Ibiza, and they were estimated to emit approximately 31.2 tonnes of CO2 when accounting for the climate impact multiplier. This included a Cessna Citation Sovereign flight to Nice, 3.9 tonnes, and a return trip to Ibiza, 8.6 tonnes, with the multiplier of 1.9 for non-CO2 effects. In 2020, a study by former MP Norman Baker suggested that this one's wife and Harry took at least 53 international flights, including 18 private jets in the 12 months to January 2020, generating 215 tonnes of CO2. This average about 4 tonnes per flight assumes a mix of private and commercial travel, with naturally private jets contributing significantly more. There were 21 private jet flights during 2021, with an additional trip from New York to California estimated at 17 tonnes. There were other trips to Canada and Britain. They were likely commercial. In 2022, there was a 60-tonne emission for a private flight from Britain to the United States. Between 2023 and 2025, there's been trips to the Caribbean and Atlanta. There's been trips to Nigeria, to Colombia. There's been trips across to Britain. And accordingly, this all adds up. Private jets emit 8 to 10 tonnes more CO2 per person than commercial flights, owing to fewer passengers. And therefore, what I've done is utilise an average of 10 tonnes per private jet trip as a conservative estimate. On a commercial flight, emissions vary roughly 0.1 to 1 tonne per person, depending on distance and class, and therefore I've gone straight down the middle and assumed an average of 0.5 tonnes per commercial flight. The period covered is 7 years from the wedding in 2018 until now, approximately 84 months. And based on the information provided, they've flown around 60 flights per year, with some 30% of that as private jets and 70% as commercial. Therefore, the emissions on a yearly basis have been private jets, 15 flights at 10 tonnes, 150 tonnes, commercial flights, 35 flights at 0.5 tonnes, amounting to 17.5 tonnes. And that's a total per year based on 50 flights. I thought that I would be somewhat conservative and cut it down from 60 to 50 flights. And that means a total of 167.5 tonnes per year. Therefore, over the period of time, the total over 7 years has been 167.5 tonnes times 7, equaling 1,172.5 tonnes. Then, adding in specific trips that we know about with regard to the actual carbon footprint that has been implemented, there comes in a further amount which takes it up to 1,457.3 tonnes. And therefore, if we round it up, having been conservative with the number of flights, this means that on total basis, this one's wife and Harry have a carbon footprint of some 1,500 tonnes of CO2 over the course of the last 7 years. That works out at roughly 214 tonnes for each year since they've been married. Is this excessive? Well, we have to consider what is the average person's yearly carbon footprint from flying. Naturally, again, this is dependent on location, lifestyle, and access to air travel, but information from the International Energy Agency explained that globally, the average person emits about 0.2 to 0.3 tonnes of CO2 per year from flying. That's taking the world's population as a whole. 214 tonnes for the Sussexes, 0.2 to 0.3 tonnes for the world as a whole. A massive difference. Now, in fairness, many people do not fly. Let's compare it with, say, in the United States, where air travel is much more common. What do we see there? Well, according to the Environmental Protection Agency, the average carbon footprint from flying in the United States is 1 to 1.5 tonnes per year per person. What about Europe? 0.8 to 1.2 tonnes of CO2 as per the European Environment Agency. Accordingly, when you take the lower end of the United States and the near upper end of Europe, the Sussexes have a carbon footprint that is over 200 times that of the average individual in the United States or Europe. 200 times. And there was Harry bleating on about climate change and the climate emergency, and clambering into a plane once again to fly to Angola. What are they doing to offset this carbon footprint? Bugger all, as far as I've heard. And once again, this is another example of the hypocrisy of the Sussexes, where they will bandwagon a cause because ultimately it provides them with advantages. For Harry, it gives him something to talk about, something to look virtuous in relation to. It allows him to perhaps have an involvement in a business. For this one's wife, naturally, she bandwagons in respect of the environment because it allows her to control people by them thinking that she cares, that she draws fuel from them by way of their responses, that it allows her to manage her facade. But once again, looking at the hard evidence, the fact is that these two hypocrites go on about the climate emergency, about climate change, and yet their carbon footprint from flying is over 200 times greater than the average of anybody in the United States or Europe. He's gone to Angola. At what cost? I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.